allows a firefighter to manually put an elevator on fire recall mode. So you've probably seen signs near the elevator that say, do not use elevator in the event of a fire, use the stairs, right? And no unaccompanied children, something like that here?
Yeah, apparently that's the rule here with your elevators.
The point being, though, that elevators do have ways of detecting when the building is on fire, sort of. The landings, the area immediately around where the elevators open up, will have a smoke and a heat detector usually. That will be tied back through the alarm system into the elevator, usually by use of dry contacts. What will happen is, if there's a fire or smoke condition that's in front of one of these landings, the elevator controller knows that there's an emergency, and it takes the elevators out of automatic operation and brings them down to that designated landing where those key switches are. The point being that passengers should not be allowed to operate the elevator when a fire is happening. There's tons of cases of this where somebody ends up in an elevator during a fire situation and the doors open to a floor that's on fire, and it's obviously not a pleasant end. So
that's fire service mode 1.
Phase 1 is what we'd call it. So the thing is, if the fire is not at the landing, the elevator might not be in phase 1 by the time the firefighters get there. So they have the key that they can insert into that key switch and turn it to on. When they turn it on, it'll manually bring all of the elevators down to that. It forces
phase 1.
Right, exactly. It'll bring all the elevators in that bank down to the floor, lock them out, clear all the hall calls, passengers can't ride it, passengers can't call it, et cetera, et cetera. The difference between these two key switches is that one is at the landing, that's the one on the left, and one is in the cab, that's the one on the right. The one on the right is what's called phase 2 operation. This allows the firefighter to then go inside the cab, flip that key switch, and although the elevator thinks the building's on fire, it'll still run and allow the firefighter to do what they need to do.
It's saying someone authorized is in this one particular cab who knows what they're doing, surely is a firefighter, not at all a pen tester, and I should take all the calls this person is giving me, and I should take all the instruction that I should be told to do. Now, if you are not trained in fire service mode, the elevator is not behaving the way you think it will behave. You will possibly get yourself stuck in the elevator. You'll possibly not drive it the way you think you can. Please don't screw around with this, even though we've done it a lot.
So, as far as the operation of fire mode, phase 2 versus automatic operation, one thing to keep in mind is that because it's an urgent emergency situation, usually when there's a fire, firefighters essentially are allowed to override all the security that's inside these systems. And we're going to talk about that a little bit more later. But you might be thinking, okay, so you're disabling all these systems. What could possibly ever override fire service?
Who could be more important in the elevator world than a fire person? Elevator inspector.
So it's not like some sinister thing where we just are all egomaniacs. But the idea is actually, it is. The idea is that if there is somebody that's on the car top, hopefully they are properly trained, and if there was an emergency situation, when they find that out, they will want to be the first ones out, I assure you. So the idea being that generally they're trained, they know how to react to the situation, and they will want to get the hell out of there.
Yeah, if you're running hoistway inspection mode, if you're operating in the hoistway, you know it's the most dangerous place to be.
Yeah, to clarify again, it's because the hoistway is an extremely dangerous place. It's not going to just automatically move the cab when someone's up there working.
Yeah. And what you might find out later, and we're not going to answer too many questions about, there's a whole bunch of auxiliary controls that you can drive and run the car from in the hoistway outside of the car itself. We're not going to tell them about that, though.
No.
What you need to realize is that this is an industry where if you're not from the industry, again, we keep kind of hitting this, you might not think something is working the way it's working. This was my favorite story when he started teaching me about all the different switching mechanisms, and I was like, oh, look at that, a shutdown switch. That's kind of funny. I guess like you could take them out of service for, I don't know why, like you got to save power because you're a greener building initiative, but what if there's a switch that says shut down and on, which position has the elevator shut down and which one has it running? Break it down for him.
Yeah, so in this case, to shut down the elevator, you turn shutdown to on.
Yeah. So yeah, if you're not from this industry, ask us questions about why things aren't working the way they're supposed to work. Let's talk about some things that should work certain ways and then don't. Who would like to understand more about elevator security? And then we're going to piss all over it. Simple elevator security, things like denying users the ability to make hall calls, right? So there are a couple of different ways of doing that. Talk to them about that.
Sure. So what you're seeing on the left is a newer cutout, as it's called. What it basically is just a key switch that's wired in series usually that allows somebody with a key to complete the circuit by turning the key and then pushing the button. You're seeing the same thing on the right. It's just an older setup. Again, basically, it's generally very straightforward. It's usually just a simple key switch that's completing a circuit. Nothing really too complicated going on in there. Occasionally, you'll see serialization on like really super large jobs, but it's definitely the exception to the rule.
But yeah, the idea of, has anyone ever been in a building where you couldn't register a call the normal way? Like maybe I found this button and I was like, oh, it must be an elevator, push button. No, it's a light. The only way to register and latch a call was to use my room key. And then that made the call. But of course, what is right below that light? Fire service mode. Yeah. That's very common, though, the idea of denying people the ability to make hall calls. Denying people the ability to make floor calls from the elevator with cutout locks, right?
Sure, absolutely. It's exactly analogous to locking out people from making hall calls. The idea being that inside the cab, there's a key switch that interacts with the button to prevent somebody from using it. Now yeah. This is not actually wired in series the way that something in the hall
might be. A lot of people think it just breaks the circuit.
No. We'll get into that.
This is another cutout key. It might be a different key than the ones you saw, those little wafer locks. Does anyone tell me what kind of lock this is? Yeah, Medico. That floor 7 is way more interesting than the floors apparently in the other photograph there. Here's another instance of a Medico lock, right?
Yes.
But now something's different here, right?
Right. So in this case, there's no button, right? It's just the key switch. Not a good idea.
So why would that be not a good idea? What's different about this? They both have Medico locks. Why would one not be code compliant? Shout it out if you think you got an idea. Yeah, they got it.
Good audience.
Who cannot fuck around with a billion keys when they're trying to operate the elevator? Fire personnel. They need every floor to have a button that they can register a call to and not screw around with individual key switches. So all of this that you're about to see, these are all different ways that people try to secure an elevator. It's not really going to work. We're about to break it all down for you. Honestly,
I've seen one that worked.
Yeah, you found one interesting locking setup. Whereas, here's a picture of a hall call button, and there's a big lock next to it. It's not locking the hall call. This is not a hall call cutout. No.
So, as you might guess, this is from a detention facility. Now, this is actually also not code compliant, although they were able to get a variance to be able to do this. Although it probably wasn't the greatest idea because somebody actually did end up getting injured as a result of that. So, with that being said, if you're trying to secure your elevator, this would be a great way to do it if you could. But I'm just going to go ahead and recommend vestibules and other forms of control around the elevator because as you're going to see from the next couple slides, there are a lot of different means.
Yeah, if you're not physically securing the elevator area, you might as well think of your elevator as an open stairwell. Everything that you just saw, all of those different security practices, let's take a giant dump on them. How about that? So, how about when there were no hall call buttons? How are you going to get the elevator to show up? Oh no, I have no hall call buttons, but I do have a piece of paper. Click. What just happened there? Let's just try that again for a second. Oh, there's no hall call buttons. Click. I'm going to get to class on time. You could probably figure out what happened. The elevator was platformed at that lower level. That was its recall level. So somebody just tripped the safety edge. They just stuck something in that broke the IR beam, and the elevator said, oh, I got to bounce my doors open here. Somebody's trying to get in.
That is not a universal trick. It just happened to work on that one elevator. But something to keep in mind, a lot of these tricks are like that.
No, it's totally smart to stick things through hoistway doors when you don't know what's beyond there, right? It's totally
safe.
He said
it, not me.
What most of what we're about to show you, though, I mean, that's just fun and hokey, but key switches. Key switches, key switches, key switches. Understanding the mechanical switching systems and understanding how to exploit them, how to get the right keys. This is what most of us do on a daily basis when we're trying to exploit elevator security. So there's a lot of different key switches, and there's a lot of different fixtures and brands that Howard's going to tell you about. And on jobs, an elevator tech will usually, all right, I've got to open this key box and get the keys for that job. Or you go to the building manager and say, oh, we're here to do your inspection. All right, give me the keys. In the industry, very few people really collect these keys or monitor these keys. They say, oh, this was the key for this job, and then they hand it back. Now, if you've explored around, you might find keys laying around and be like, oh, I got to check, I'm going to write this down, or I'm going to use this key. That's something that urban explorers might do. What Howard's been doing for the past years and years and years in this industry is not just finding and writing down keys, but logging systematically every single key he's ever found and every single key switch where it has worked. As far as I know, he's the only gentleman that's been maintaining a database of keys and a collection of keys with full knowledge of where to use them. Now, this was Howard's keys when I first met him. Would you like to see Howard's keys today? There's more of them.
It's actually even bigger now. And I
Kind
think
of puts into perspective those sets you can buy online.
yeah, I think I left 1 or 2 at home too.
So yeah, talk to him about why you need this many and what you're seeing on jobs.
The basic reason that there are so many different keys is because there are so many different manufacturers of elevator fixtures. I'm not going to get into all the details of this because I don't want to waste too much time on the differences between the fixtures, but what it really boils down to is that if you are attentive to what you're actually seeing, you'll start to notice patterns. So if you could go back one. Sure. This is something you can recognize very easily usually. This is the Otis chiclet, or the Series 1 fixtures. We call them chiclets because they look like little square chiclets, and they're very recognizable in that way. They're almost always keyed alike. So if you happen to notice that the elevator is using those fixtures, you also pretty much know what key it's using. And that applies not just to that particular line of Otis fixtures, but to newer Otis fixtures as well. There's a company called GAL Manufacturing in the Bronx. They are also generally keyed alike. Innovation Industries, another huge manufacturer of generic fixtures. Again,
these aren't elevator brands. These are resellers of aftermarket parts.
Aftermarket parts, yeah.
And they're all keyed alike.
And again, I mean, we can do this all day. Adams is another a provider of parts. They key them alike.
I do this to him all the time. I send him photos from jobs, and I'm like, I'm in this building. I need to know what key this is. I really got to get up there. He's like, come on. It's a square button. It's not recessed. You know this. I'm like, no, I don't. Tell me what the hell this is. He's like, Schindler. I'm like, okay, fine. Security's coming. I got to get out of here. What's your answer invariably is always like, sometimes he'll text me before he's like, the email hasn't loaded yet. I'm on my phone. It's probably EPCO. Like, because everything's EPCO.
Yeah, EPCO is definitely a very popular one.
Now, when you see, like, when he rags on me all the time, right? Because he's like, you know this. What's the font? What is it? I'm like, I don't know, dude. Come on, tell me. But, like, if you actually compare, you might think, well, I mean, they're just round and they have a button and blah. But, like, look at them side by side. If you get into this, you'll start to learn how to distinguish. You'll start to learn various characteristics, and you can kind of, like, train spot them, just like he does. We'll give you one that's really easy. How many people have seen buttons like this before? You've been probably in like a low rise, a slow high, like hydraulic elevator, like a Holiday Inn or something like that, right? This is your classic low rise elevator system by Dover.
Yeah, Dover had this market cornered in like low rise hydraulic elevators for the longest time. Dover ended up getting purchased by a company called ThyssenKrupp. ThyssenKrupp now makes their own fixtures, but for a while they were still installing Dover fixtures.
But then this is great. Just like talk through this one.
Okay. So this is something
we just had to show you this for a second.
This is something I saw once on vacation, actually. Obviously, it's a Dover elevator, right? Because it says Dover. And just take my word for it. That's a Dover position indicator. It's just another one of the many fixtures that if you start to recognize them after a while, you'll know who made it and where it originated and, again, how it's wired and all the fun stuff about how it works. But this is where it starts to break down. This is not a button. This is the firefighter's jewel. This indicates to a firefighter when the building is on fire and the elevator's on phase 1 and 2.
Not the stock one, though.
But it's weird because it certainly looks like a button from a distance. And if I had to guess, if you were paying attention to the other slide, it looks like an Adams Survivor Plus fixture. It's just weird. It doesn't really seem to jive with the rest of the panel. And this is also pretty weird. This is actually a ThyssenKrupp key switch on a Dover, again, on a Dover panel, but it's a Dover compatible ThyssenKrupp key switch. Stop me if this is getting weird. But they're making parts that obviously fit the systems that they used to make. It's just a newer model of it. Now, again, they've got Adams fixtures for the push buttons for most of these floors, except apparently not for 4 or M. For some reason, they didn't need to make those vandal resistant. And then they have EPCO Designer Line, I believe it's called, is the push bar right there that's custom engraved. But this is the one that drives me really nuts. The door open button has no light. The door close button has a light. So just to, I guess, let you know that it's ignoring you when you push door close.
Yeah. All of that shit on the internet, by the way, about the door close button hack, how many people know that's bullshit? How many people are convinced it's not and they swear it worked when they tried it? All right, good. Very good skeptics in the room.
How many people know that there is a sort of truth to it, but most people misunderstand it? All right.
What is your theory for why people probably started that rumor?
There's two things. The first is that on independent service, you have to hold the closed door button to close the door. That's how the elevator knows when to close the door. Somebody's running it and it says, okay, I'm ready to close the door. They hit the closed door button, the door's closed. So I think somebody somewhere probably saw somebody running a car in independent and
Maybe
they said,
nonstop or something.
yeah. And basically they said, well, he hit door close and the floor we were going to, and it went right there, which is pretty much independent service in a nutshell.
Right. No, but you weren't witnessing a hack. You were witnessing someone who had a key.
But there's also, though, another thing. The sort of half-truth to the elevator hack with the door close button is that on older relay logic controllers, because there was such a limited amount of different states that the elevator could really exist in logically, there could be weird sort of unexpected consequences of doing things like holding the door close button for the duration of your ride. There is at least one model of Otis controller, relay logic, that if you are holding the door close button, it will still try to collect every call on the way up or the way down.
It'll still stop.
It'll stop, it'll level, and it'll wait as though the doors are opening and closing. But if you're holding door closed, the doors simply stay closed.
So you're just kind of being a dick. You're not being faster. But this is the kind of stuff, if you get into, fixtures and identifying, you'll notice. Like, how many people ever used to build computers and swap out parts, and you could spot, be like, oh, when did you put a new CD drive in your computer? The beige isn't quite the same color, These two hall call buttons, most people wouldn't even notice, except an elevator guy instantly walks by and goes, oh, wow, they clearly swapped out this one.
I'm super OCD, and this drove me nuts when I saw it. The one on the bottom is Helvetica. The one on top is a font called Gordon. There's a whole history to it.
But talk to this guy and buy him drinks. He'll talk about this all night.
The point being, though, actually what happened here is this was in an office building where there happened to be more down demand from this floor than up demand. So at some point, the arrow broke. The one on top, I can just tell, is the original one. Somebody broke it eventually, and the mechanic that came out was like, well, I need another push button, right? So they probably called up EPCO, and they said, hey, I need a down button. And they're like, well, which kind?
And people in the industry aren't all like him. They don't care.
And he was probably like, well down.
So you get EPCO. But let's talk about something you should care about, and the industry should really care about more. And we're really shocked at how many people in this industry, or pseudo in this industry, are selling keys, and they're like bullshit sets of keys.
Sure. So, like I was saying, a lot of elevators are key-to-like, and there are some vendors that have taken advantage of this to various ends. It's primarily marketed towards firefighters and fire departments who have a need to have the keys on hand. So sometimes, even though there should be a Knox box or a key box somewhere in the building, or a building manager should have the keys, sometimes that's not always the case. In an emergency, there's no time to waste. The firefighters want their own sets of keys, right?
Yeah. So this set's popular. This is a $70 set. Get you 8 keys. Those doing the math, that's like a little under $9 a key. Does it come free with the smoke, though, right? Yeah.
The smoke is included in the package. Yeah. It ships to UPS ground.
There's another set that people sell for $200, 17 keys, a little bit more per key. But of course, you're getting more options, right? A firefighter would really want this set because it's got so many options for them, right?
Right. Well, what I like about this one is that the vendor very, very courteously decided to take nice, straight-on photos of the keys.
Yeah. So if you were in Jos Vegas' talk, exactly. And Howard was able to look at those and instantly identify most of them, and he realizes what a useful set this is.
This set is probably one of the best values in the industry for fire departments, as long as your particular fire department serves a geographic area including Massachusetts, New Jersey, New Hampshire, New York, South Carolina, and Arizona.
Yeah, so if that's where your truck is rolling through the streets all the time, all together somehow, I guess this is the set for you. Go ahead and drop the $200.
So, realistically, what probably happened was somebody just kept handing the vendor keys and saying, I've seen this work for fire service on an elevator. And then they say, well,
add it to the ring. Now, the thing about that, when people are not really discriminating what they're putting on these key sets, and they're not even very sharp on how they're duplicating these keys, you'll get situations like this from some suppliers, where clearly one was a nice original machine code cut key, and the other was just run on a duplicator, and maybe a duplicate of a duplicate. So in the industry, thankfully, as we have learned, the key switches, a lot of them have really bad tolerances. So all these keys will kind of work, But if you are interested in getting proper keys that are made well, keys that are not just super sloppy, that's the difference between, buying them from, let's say, elevatorkeys.com versus just going on eBay and saying, oh, I need the 2839 key.
Yeah, and I can actually just tell you, definitely don't bother trying to order from that website. They will ID you and put you through endless verification processes.
Yeah. But we'll talk about something now that some people might say, well, I've seen these systems where, forget key switches, they're not even buttons. I've seen destination dispatch, it's called. How many have ever ridden an elevator like this? All right, so there's some around here, new modern idea. The idea being for super efficiency, you shouldn't tell passengers to select their floors, you should tell them to dictate, I want to go to 17, and it will tell you, oh, go to elevator A, go to elevator E, and the elevators will optimize those calls and collect them up. Well, in a destination dispatch system, if there's no control in the elevator, how does any of this work? What does every elevator have to have in its configuration package for emergencies? Fire mode. What's a fire person going to do? They're not going to bang on like a touch screen with giant gloves. No, there's almost always a hidden panel that you can key open with the fire keys in a destination dispatch elevator, and it will have the full bank of buttons. And as you learned, you don't even have to be on fire mode. Those are regular hall call buttons at that point.
Yeah, this was a kind of weird situation. When the panel was opened, it was demonstrated to me that even though the elevator was not actually on firefighters operation, pushing that button once you had the lock panel open allowed it to sort of operate like a traditional automatic elevator.
Yeah. But this is a very modern, futuristic kind of system, right? Let's forget about the future for a minute. This is still an industry really stuck in the past in a lot of ways. So when we meet with people, right, and you know a lot about physical security from me, and I've learned elevators from you. What did someone tell you when you were looking at the new key switch they were equipping?
Yeah, this is actually from a casino, and we had the pleasure of interfacing with the building's architect, who had an incredible amount of personal involvement with selecting elevator components. And this topic of security obviously came up because it's a casino. And I remember very distinctly when he was describing to me how he picked the lock cylinders. And his exact words were, no one could ever subvert our security because we use unpickable tubular locks.
Yeah. So yeah, I mean, they think tubulars are the latest and greatest thing that ever came out. Somebody somewhere pushes Medico keys in some instances. I got a big collection of them through him. I laid them all out, and I said, well, that looks kind of funny. Baba, give me your screwdriver for a second. And I tightened it up on the screwdriver, and I said, oh, well, okay, first of all, what you got here is keys that are the same bitting and same cut for half the damn blade of the key. And the rest are all just part of a mastered system. What did you learn from Yost yesterday, and what did you learn from us if you ever talk about master keying? You can decode the top master key with a large enough sample data set. Not going to say we did, but, lol, we did. I got this photo from him from a restaurant one day. He's like, check it out. I'm like, wow, okay, you're on like a Dover job, right? Looks like a Dover impulse key. He's like, it is, but you won't believe where it is. So there's just a lot of key reuse. There's like, people think these are unique keys and they're getting them from a supplier, from a supplier, from a supplier. Your keys are not, Mouse is saying voting machines have this same situation. Somebody who's not building the lock, they're just ordering a part, is probably ordering a part that is not as unique as they think. Ask him downstairs or during the Q&A what NEMA 7, super destructo resistant, fixtures.
Explosion-proof
fixtures have to do with gumball machines, and he'll tell you a story. Here's another one, just kind of the behind-the-times thinking of the industry. This is the official instruction set from MCE, one of the elevator providers that does some Internet of Things, remote connectivity. And they very specifically say, create an Edge account and punch a hole in your firewall called MCE support. Make sure the password is MCE support. In fact, go ahead and take your admin password, change that to MCE support. Just make it all MCE support so that we can always get in. So this is the latest generation of product, by the way, from MCE, the IQ and the iView systems. This is what they are now moving to for the idea of remote management. We're just going to let this video play and see what some people might think is, would you want your elevators with all of this functionality being connected to the internet with the same password on an XP box? Yeah, Josh wants the badges on the same system. They probably make a module for that. Yeah.
The good news is, although this was installed in 2014, I believe they paid for the extended XP support.
Yeah. How many people were at the social engineering talk? Very, very groovy. How many people are going to laugh at this?
As your building's requirements change, you can customize your elevator's operation to fit your specific needs with a simple telephone call to our elite engineers.
Elite.
I wanted to reserve one of our elevators.
It won't be a problem. I'm going to take elevator number 2 from the bank, and I'll reserve it for your move.
You can restrict service to a floor under renovation in a
That's
hotel.
right. I've got it reserved
Or place a car on independent service to use it for moving
welcome.
furniture
Glad to be
or for the exclusive use of a VIP. It can all be done with a single phone call.
Indeed.
Yeah. So you can call up and say, oh yeah, I need elevator 10 to be on independent service. And there's supposedly, a little owner card that has your credentials on it, which nobody could ever possibly bluff their way through and say, oh no, I don't have the card in front of me, but the VIP's coming right away. You got to do this for me, man.
Yeah, I'm paying for elite service.
It's the OnStar of elevators, basically. Like, how about this one? This is great. The FEOK1 is the most prevalent, we would say most prevalent, right? Fire key?
Yeah, but actually, let me take the slide
Yeah.
if you don't mind. So in 2007, the elevator safety code was revised to include a standardized fire service key. The idea was to remove the need for firefighters carrying these massive key rings. They said, let's just make one key. And let's restrict it because we want to make sure this doesn't fall into the wrong hands. There's too much that could go wrong.
So it makes sense that they put in the code, you shall not have this key, it must only be limited to firefighters. It makes a little less sense
That they
put the
published
direct bidding code in the freaking document. What? Yeah.
There's actually a funny backstory to this too, because the 2007 and 2008 code changed. In 2008, they clarified that the key was supposed to be cut clockwise with that bidding code. Somebody said, this is a bad idea. We should improve the security by cutting it counterclockwise.
So you need 2 keys for FEOK1. But in general, I mean, it's all naked on the inside. We talk about all the key switches, we talk about the systems, but, these are just circuits.
At the end of the day, most of the circuits are simply on or off. There's really nothing complex in there, and simply completing the circuit sends whatever desired message you're trying to send back to the controller. So if for some reason the panel is exposed to you, you essentially have root on that elevator.
Yeah. So let's say you're in a situation where there's a floor that's locked out, and you say, oh, I want to go up to the penthouse, the top floor, and I can't. Well, if that elevator panel is something that you can get behind maybe, so the basement doesn't work, top floor doesn't work, but if we kind of, flip this number and flip that number, and whoever was in the video doing this, they go, okay, well, what do we got here? Okay, so this is the independent service key switch. What's right behind it? Well, simple freaking wire contacts. So if we go ahead and take those wires off and bridge them together, the elevator thinks the independent mode switch has been flipped. Do not do this. If we didn't make it clear earlier, these are live mains back here. These are live 120 volt current.
And we'll show you something later.
We'll show you later. But sure enough, independent mode on, go where you want to go. You just have to stand there for the entire travel of the zone holding hot leads together. So that person was kind of a dumbass. But sure enough, yeah, duct tape, of course. That would be the way to do it. But there you go, get up to the top floor, etc. Why? Because that swing panel was able to be popped open with no detection whatsoever and no real prevention whatsoever of that happening. Other security that you may see in, let's say, a big building like that, we couldn't get up there because we didn't have the key card. No, I mean, whoever was in that video couldn't get up there because they didn't have the key card.
I thought this was fun.
It was that guy who I did that thing that time. So key card systems, again, this could be an entire talk on its own. It actually already is an entire talk on its own. Watch Major Malfunctions old talks about magstripe hacking. If you want to ask us more about how the mag reader or how the card reader or the RF reader in the cab is interacting with the controller, ask us later or ask us downstairs. For the most part, you can clone them, you can get around these systems, or just tell them to turn off. I've seen elevators where there's a key switch that says card reader enable disable. Just disable it and then the card reader doesn't care that it's there.
Would it surprise you that they're key to like also?
Yeah. So for pen testing and for getting around security, what do we do? Again, it's all about the key switches. It's all about independent service and having the right key rings. through working with Howard, we've optimized our sets of keys through like how common they can be. So we have this key ring is really rare, leave it in the car. Then we have this key ring is pretty common, let's keep it in the red teamer bag. And then this key ring is really common, let's keep that in my pocket. So using independent keys, cutout keys, or sometimes fire keys, you can do fun things like, well, maybe this. Let's say you have a building, and at the front of this building is a security desk. And if you're going into the building, you're supposed to interact with that security desk. But this building also has a rear exit. There's people that can come down an elevator and exit through a rear door. That's a rear door you're not supposed to be able to get back in. Guess what? You can. But if you get to this elevator, even then, they figured, well, you know, what's anybody going to do? This elevator is not going to respond to any calls because people don't have the badge. If you take control of this elevator, then maybe drive it in fire mode somewhere else into the building and get off.